welcome to Ignite Your Power, the Kathy Mou Podcast. And today I am so honored and lucky to have a guest today. And I have Leslie. She is also a life coach and someone who is a mental health advocate. And also, she's an endo warrior just like me. And today we're going to be talking all about endometriosis, her story, and everything in between, and all these amazing questions that we always get from other people. And since it's going to be Endometriosis Month and Awareness Month, we wanted to debunk a lot of myths or, answer a lot of questions that people need and, you know, want to learn more. So, hi, Leslie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hello. Hey, Kathy. It's such a pleasure and honor to get to chat with you today.
Yes.
As Kathy said, I'm Leslie Patriarco. I'm in upstate New York. I am a school social worker by day, and I have an LMSW, so licensed master social work, working towards my LCSW with goals of taking on mental health therapy clients for women struggling with chronic illness within the next year or so, as all goes to plan. Yes, I know, so excited. And then also do some life coaching on the side for chronic illness. Looking to take on new clients as we get closer to the summer months as well. So super excited about this. And, I think we all can find those passion projects that we do, right? And when you can find something that like already is an aspect of your whole life and also weave it into things you love and your background professionally, it just kind of comes and melts together in a really beautiful way. So I am so happy to be here and, to share my story, share some of my journey. Probably similar to many years. It's been a very long one and a long way to go. And also kind of talk about, like you said, some of those myths that are out there and how I've navigated them, and also how it kind of shows up in the mental health world that I work in and from the personal perspective as well.
Amazing. We are so excited and honored to have you here. So, you want to just share a bit about your personal journey with endometriosis and how has that also impacted your mental health?
Absolutely. And I think anybody listening to this already knows it's very rare to not have a chronic illness, especially, one such as endometriosis that's one of the top 20 most painful conditions in the entire world, and not have it impact your mental health. Like, I don't know one endo warrior who has not had it impact their mental health. Um, my journey goes back to being a teenager where I wasn't hearing my friends really talking about how much pain and how severe their pain was. It's awkward to talk about is a teenage girl, let alone is adults. So that's also a big piece is why it takes so long for the diagnosis to happen. And personally, for me, it was at least 10 years before I was finally validated with a diagnosis from when my symptoms started. Um, so, just I remember I think when I was a senior in high school, I finally said something to my mom, and I look back now and it's like I have the most supportive parents. I don't know why I wasn't open with how bad things were. I mean, I think my mom knew that it wasn't pretty typical, but also I would just kind of be like, I have a headache. I'm going to stay home today from school, or, my cramps are super bad today. And I don't know why. And I look back on that now, and I think it is some of the shame complex that happens for
Mm.
people
Yeah.
where we're not just fully honest, even when we do have great support systems.
Yeah.
When I was 17, I finally said, hey, my friend just went on birth control because she was having a lot of trouble with her periods. Mom, I think I need to see somebody about this. So I saw a gynecologist, and without any other further questions asked, no scans, nothing, it was just here's your first pill packet. It's going to help everything. And maybe for 5 years, it gave me some relief. It made things more regular, but there's no education behind this could be something more. and there is no education of pros and cons of taking hormones at a young age either at that time. And I could go down a rabbit hole on that, but I won't.
Yeah.
um, so fast forward, I started having all these incidences where in my like early teen or late teens, early 20s of like going to the emergency room because they thought I would have appendicitis and them saying, I have no idea what's wrong with you. There's nothing in your scans. Your work looks awesome. Head on home. Um, the stigma and the gaslighting you get from kind of being treated like a drug seeker after they see, chronic abdominal pain with no cause in your chart. It depends on the doctor you get when you present at an emergency room. And while your symptoms are very real, endometriosis rarely does show up on scans. And even though your symptoms are real, you start to gaslight yourself after you've been medically gaslit for so long. And a lot of times it's not even necessarily the doctor's fault, it's the limit on their education as well. And an emergency department is there to rule out life-threatening things and get you out the door. So a lot of times, they send you back to your gynecologist, they send you back to your practitioner that you see generally. And sometimes they dig deeper and sometimes they say, oh, it's okay, you're fine, we'll repeat the tests, and then it happens again. So
Yeah.
I vividly remember being 21, just freshly 21, and I had gone on a department trip with our social work department at the college I went to New York City. We were going to be doing a lot of advocacy things and sightseeing throughout the way. And it was a weekend of a lot of travel, stress, little sleep, walking, not eating the right foods. And we were on the bus ride home and I was in agony, and I was just kind of laying across two bus seats with a puke bucket next to me in so much pain. My professor, a dear friend of mine now, was like, let's pull over, we'll take you to an emergency room. And I was like, no, they're not going to find anything. This has happened before. It's just going to pass. Let's just get back to Rochester. And so however many hours that bus ride was, I think it was a good 5 or 6. We got off the bus, and one of my good friends at the time had taken me to the ER for yet another emergency room trip that resulted in with you. And then in the morning, my mom came to Rochester and brought me back home with her. It was right about to be our February break in school. So I came back home and saw my general GYN, a man who delivered me when I was born and delivered my sister
Wow.
and was my mother's GYN. So had been in practice for many years. And you're sitting there thinking, like, I shouldn't. And so when we went into the office and he used the word endometriosis and booked me for a surgery 2 days later, I really didn't ask a lot of questions. I was so excited. My hopes were so high. He said I fit the criteria so perfectly. And then I went in and I remember coming out and they were like, no, we found nothing but a lot of adhesions within you.
Oh
And
my God.
no explanation for adhesions.
Oh
So
my God.
between 21 and 27, there was like 3 or 4 different gynecologists in there trying to figure out what was going on. I was doing pelvic PT, trying every form of birth control until finally I was 27 years old and I started my first big girl job after my master's program. And I was working in my alma mater high school at the time, and it was not even the first month of school being over in that September. And once again, I'm back to the ER, and it was worse than it ever was. For days and days and days, they were seeing fluid. 3 or 4 different times they would discharge me, and then the gynecologist would send me straight back. And so finally, the general surgeon was like, at this point, you're suffering. I'm going to do an exploratory surgery and let's see what's going on. I was fine with it at that point. From the
Yeah.
years of suffering, I was like, somebody needs to go in me. There's something not right.
Mm-hmm.
And this was like a couple days before Thanksgiving. I think it was actually the morning before Thanksgiving because I remember people were coming into town and we just didn't know quite what was going on, and they ended up doing the open surgery. And when the surgeon got in there, my appendix was completely strangled by these like dark black spots.
Oh my
And so the
gosh.
pathology showed chronic appendicitis. Yeah, a chronic appendicitis with foreign tissue was all the pathology said. But I was like, okay, it's something. And it made me start to trust my body. And I was like, okay, there's a step. Now what? So the appendix was out, and then 5, 6 months later, the symptoms are coming back again. So I was at a loss. And so, as
Yeah.
many of us do, and this is kind of how I started my give back journey with endometriosis and getting involved in online platforms for advocacy and building a business around it.
Mm-hmm.
I started reaching out to other women who had my symptoms, and I started joining the Facebook support groups. I started researching in medical articles, and I was typing in Google searches along the lines of dark black spots on the appendix, chronic inflammation of the appendix. And you're seeing statistics of like 3 to 14% of women that have endometriosis have it on their appendix. And I was like, how does the pathology not define what it is? All of
Yeah.
it says is unknown tissue. And so once again, gaslighting yourself a little bit there. Like, this is
Mm,
a surgeon, this is a pathologist. You would think that it would
yeah.
say more. If it was anything of concern, it should be documented.
Yeah.
But the more severe the symptoms got, the more willing and desperate I got for more answers.
Yeah.
And I finally found one of the huge names that you hear when you Google endometriosis, one of the first articles that pops up for you when you search endometriosis information. And because I'm lucky enough to have the platform, the resources
Yeah.
that I do, the support of my family, I was able to have excision with one of the world renowned surgeons that you see celebrities
Wow.
have, um, which was amazing, costly, but amazing, and had to travel very, very far to have this happen. So finally, after those, the consultation, he was so validating, took so much time with me, did an ultrasound, a pelvic exam while we were together in that time. And he was like, I strongly suspect you have endometriosis. And he said, my guess is that the GYN was not trained to look for much past, gunpowder color lesions. Lesions can become all sorts of colors, and they can be as small as microscopic and as large can be.
Yeah.
So he booked my surgery, and 2 months later, I woke up crying and kept repeatedly
Oh.
asking, did they find endometriosis in my anesthetized, however you say the word, state? And they would say, yes, honey, they did. And I would kind of drift back to sleep.
Oh.
So at age 27, after 10 years from taking medications for my symptoms,
Yeah.
finally I had a diagnosis.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
and after that, yeah, and so it was so validating. But I think once again, you have surgery with the gold standard person and no excision versus ablation and all the research you've done over the years. You did what you were supposed to do, the best of the best. So in my mind, I was like, I'm great now, right? Like, I was
Yeah.
stage 1, I got it early. This is
Yeah.
awesome. Um, I should be good to go for life. And
Yeah.
then 2.5 years goes by and symptoms come back again.
Yeah.
So chronic means chronic, and I wasn't prepared for that after the original diagnosis. I definitely was not. And it's even more frustrating when you have to take on the mental load of the people around you, not quite understanding the diagnosis, since everybody who has endometriosis, their journey is so different and their experience is
Yeah.
so different. Some people have it and have heavy periods. Some people have it and are on disability. Some people
Yeah.
have one surgery and they're phenomenal for the majority of the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Well, myself and unfortunately a lot of women I've connected with similar ages, ours for whatever reason seems to be very, very aggressive. And because there's no treatment besides surgery to
Yeah.
remove the tissue, everything else is kind of a bandage. And there's
Yeah.
no curative or, even things that manage actual endometriosis yet. hopefully we're staying living for the hope of that. It was a lot of thinking and gaslighting and spiraling of, "Oh my god, I
Yeah.
can't afford to have another surgery with this cost again and this travel, and it's not
Yeah.
feasible for the rest of my life." The internal self-talk of, "Do I settle for ablation? If this is going to be so aggressive, it's only been 2.5 years. Was it worth it?" The shame of having my parents have helped me, and then here I am so sick
Yeah.
again. And going back to kind of that mindset of, is it really that bad when you're 29 and like living your life in bed most of the
Yeah.
time, all day, every day? Yeah, it is that bad. Like, that's not normal.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes the people that love you the most to point it out to you that it's not normal.
Yeah.
So, I made the decision to try to find somebody else at that point. Hopefully closer, but was doing research, couldn't find people. And then once again, through this online community, a girl that I have connected with, she is such a great human being with her advocacy and accounts. Posted she was having surgery with somebody who was starting to open a practice that
Wow.
refused to be like a money pit mill and
Yeah.
understood this is a chronic illness and wasn't surgery only mindset. And I have been with that surgeon ever since, and I'm so glad that I have found him because hopefully there's more coming like him, but his
Yeah.
practice is kind of started around the sense of this is a socially unjust thing. It's a misunderstood disease. It grows very similarly to cancer.
Yeah.
And he had the excision training because he had begun as a gynecologist for oncology. And throughout his
Wow.
studies and his understanding of the immune system, he was like, this is such a gap, and it's unfair that women have to pay to get the gold standard instead of ablation that most general GYN offer. And there is no paid endorsements, nothing there, but I just sing his praises over and over again. He's in Bayshore, New York, Dr. Pankaj Singhal. And he
Oh.
really works to try to overcome some of those injustices that are out there, and I have been so grateful for him since. I've had 4 total excisions at this point, and from that stage 1, and after talking to the office who did my diagnostic surgery and confirmed the endometriosis, they told me there was no possibility that my endo could have advanced that much in 2.5 years after that surgery. Well, I woke up with stage 4
Oh
after
gosh.
excision number 2. So it is possible. And
Yeah.
then, I also within my journey, I have had to have a hysterectomy. It was preventative because my odds of fertility were extremely low. And I went into that with the understanding and full discussions with my surgeon that this is not curative, but it may help a lot of things, and it reduces your cancer risk 100% for the uterine cancer. That some of the changes that are happening, the inactivity that we're seeing in the
Yeah.
uterus are likely showing. So I did move forward with that. And once again, not curative. I do still have stage 4 endo. It has attacked other organs of the body besides what likely was my
Wow.
appendix back then. My ureters, my bladder, my colon, small bowels, kind of just everywhere.
Wow.
My ureters were bent, starting early stages of hydrophonesis with the kidneys. And so at this point, I have that stage 4 as well as the frozen pelvis that you hear about.
Oh my
Um,
gosh. I'm so
and
sorry. That's a lot. That's a lot. And a
it
lot
has been
of
a lot.
women.
It has
Yeah.
been.
Like
Yeah.
honestly,
And that's
and
the thing that kills me is
yeah, I want people to know in
that there's
general,
so many
like,
women.
yeah, that endometriosis actually affects your whole body, not just like the reproductive organs that people make it seem like it is. Like, again, I want to
100%.
emphasize that hysterectomy is not a cure for women who have
Mhm.
endometriosis, right? Like, a lot of
Absolutely.
OBGYNs will misdiagnose and say
Mhm.
hysterectomies will cure your pain, which will not, right? And then, like what you said
Correct.
in the beginning, Leslie, about how we are all put on birth control at such a young age without any education. Again, that's another thing, right? Like, it doesn't work for everybody. Like,
Mm-mm.
again, it's just putting a Band-Aid over
Absolutely.
whatever. And look at you, like after so many surgeries, 4 surgeries already, and you've had so much damages inside your organs, and it's like, wow, that's crazy. And you're still having endometriosis pain.
Absolutely. And I think, like, to speak to the question about how does endo impact your mental health,
Yeah.
it's hard to discuss areas that it doesn't in
Yeah.
certain points, you know. I think a big thing that myself and other women that I've discussed with feel that weight of feeling like we have to explain ourselves not only to doctors that don't understand the disease. Every time we have an ER trip or go to a new appointment,
Mm,
we almost end up educating them. It's exhausting.
yeah.
Also, you know, the question of, you already had a surgery, how is this still happening for you? Why do you keep having surgeries if it's not making anything better?
Mhm.
um the What's the game plan? This is too young for you to have all of these surgeries. People are coming to you asking these, they want the best intentions with their questions, but they forget bodies either. And it takes a lot of vulnerability to share with people what we're going on, what's going on with our bodies and what's going on in our mindset around it. Um, you know, endo takes a toll. You know, sometimes you have flare ups and you cancel plans that you really, really want to attend. I have lost friends for me when they talk to me, everything's too heavy. You know, we can't person at a normal, healthy person at the end of the day. I use normal, very, you know, a lot of the times that's going to include some pretty dark things, some pretty heavy stuff. And while there's things that, you know, I've learned over the years, it's, you know, better to pick and choose who you share those things with and how you share those things with individuals and who you feel safe sharing those things with. There's an extent of that if you feel it's heavy, imagine what it feels like living it
Yeah.
24/7. If a person who's struggling is venting to you, it's because it's so heavy they can't carry it alone in those moments. Um, a
So
trick I
true.
have learned for that too, for people listening, is something you can do to try to not let that impede on your relationships is ask, "Hey, do you have space to listen to what's going on for me right now?"
Mm.
It's a really good interpersonal effectiveness skill, to make sure that, you know, you are sharing with somebody who feels that they can handle that in the moment. Because I know there's been times that I don't feel like I can handle listening to somebody kind of ramble about the
Yeah.
little rumblings in their day, because in my life I'm like, oh my God, that's what you're stressed about. Which
Mhm.
at the end of the day, both things are extremely valid.
That's true. It's true. It's just trying to understand it from the other person and seeing if they have the capacity for it or not. Doesn't mean that they love you less. It's just maybe they're going through a tough time at the moment and they just don't have that mental capacity or emotional capacity to like,
Mm.
talk about very heavy things. Sometimes I have those days. I'm like, my daughter's so full of it. Like she's just had a temper tantrum kind of day. And I'm like, I just don't want anything heavy pulled on me right now. Like, I just want some like good news. You know? Like, doesn't mean I love you
Exactly.
less. Doesn't, yeah.
Exactly.
Like, catch me on another day.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes too, like, for people that also, you know, one of this reason that we're talking about exactly is kind of where I turned my efforts outward, right?
Yeah.
I thought I was using this as a really positive coping skill to share my story, have an endo
Mm-hmm.
account, start figuring out where my business goals were
Yeah.
in putting together my endo and this. And I realized after about a year into it, I was not coping. I was deflecting. I was
Mm,
projecting and moving those feelings into advocacy instead of
yeah.
letting myself feeling. I was trying to conceptualize what was going on. I was doing a lot of
Yeah.
rationalization justification for feeling how I felt instead of just acknowledging my feelings and feeling them. It wasn't a healthy coping skill at that point. And
Yeah.
that's something too that I really always say, it is okay to take breaks when you're
Mhm.
feeling the chronic illness burnout. You do not have to be an advocate for everybody else.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself, your emotions, your physical, your emotional, and your mental well-being before you can do that good work.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for pointing that out because, a lot of us with people or people with endometriosis, we always feel like we have to advocate. We always feel like, we have to put others first because, we understand how much pain we all have had to go through, how much gaslighting and, how we've grown up with all this pain, etc. And we don't want other people feeling that way. But if we don't take care of ourselves, then how are you going to ever take care of other people? It's just in general, right? And so, that's why I
Absolutely.
think self-love and self-care, it's something that I always talk about nowadays, but I noticed that, people with endometriosis, you have to really take care of yourself. It's a lot of self-care and self-love that I think we're all here to learn more about. Like, in the spiritual world, I've been into spirituality lately, but when they say like when you have a chronic illness in this lifetime, it's like you need to learn more self-love and self-care for yourself because we are compassionate people, right? Like we always want to help other people. We're more empaths. And it's like instead of helping everybody else, we have to help ourselves. And it's so beautiful that you said that and mentioned that because I don't want people feeling guilty, like, okay, like they're not putting themselves first or putting everybody else first instead of themselves. And that's where my question leads to next is, how do you like, what are the options for people in advocacy? And since we're not all of us are advocates, but there are people who don't even have diagnosis yet, but they know in their gut feeling that there's something, right? And like me, I've researched about endometriosis and I was gaslit from my OBGYN saying like, okay, you don't have like right off the bat, you don't have endo. And I was like, what? But
Did you do
like in my
laparoscopy on me when I wasn't paying attention or
yeah, it was so crazy. So she just like automatically, didn't like dismiss me. And I'm sure thousands of women get that. And,
Mhm.
that's a thing that a lot of people ask me, like, what questions do I ask my OBGYN? Or like, how do I advocate for myself at the doctor's office? And I wasn't good at this because growing up, I always thought like the medical system, the doctor knows everything. You just listen to them and you're just like, all right, okay, I'm just crazy. But in the endometriosis world, you learn like, nope, you're not crazy. You're correct. Like you just need to ask the right people, the right questions, find the right doctors. And so for you, what do you think are like great questions for people to ask? Since, you've been to so many doctor's appointments and you've had great family support, and a lot of us don't have that growing up, and just not having any I guess, knowledge of how to do that. So what good questions would there be to ask your OBGYN in general when you are trying to figure out if you have endometriosis or you're just trying to get a diagnosis or just getting more questions answered, etc.
Absolutely. And it's a great question. And I think while, for this it's endometriosis more specific, that these are also good tips for any illness, any symptoms you're
Okay,
experiencing, right?
perfect.
So I think something to start with is if you can bring a support person with you, do it. It's always, always, always great to have a second set of ears and another person there, especially if
Mm,
it's somebody who's seen your struggles.
yeah.
Because I find myself even shaking my head, yes, sometimes, even after years of doing this, when a doctor tells me something that maybe I know is not necessarily true, but they're telling me in their experience, this is what's happened. Or something I find myself that I do often is I downplay my symptoms. So
Mm.
having somebody there, usually it's my father that's really good at being like, BS,
Oh,
that's not true. And calls you out
yeah.
or can help advocate for the severity of your symptoms. Because I think a lot of times too, especially things that are chronic illnesses or things that are harder to diagnose, like with endo, you can have every scan come back extremely clear, every test in the world be very clear, and until they're inside of you, they don't see it, right? So I
Mhm.
think a lot of times having done that own research, one, trust your body. Two, if
Mm.
something does not feel right, it almost always is not right. Um, and it can be hard because a lot of times with chronic illness, mental health conditions such as anxiety and depression can develop comorbidly too. And also, a lot of the times with chronic illness, we're more prone to having other chronic illnesses if we have one. So, chicken, egg, trying to figure out which is which.
Mhm.
I think trusting your body is huge. If you know something's off, once again, don't back off if you're not getting the answers, or find somebody who wants to do the investigating with you. A doctor should be your partner through things. We always
Mm.
feel this like power difference. I feel like when we go into a doctor's office, like
Yeah.
Kathy and I both said, like, shouldn't they know better than us? Like, why am I educating a doctor on why I still have endo
Yeah.
after having a laparoscopy and after having a hysterectomy? Well, we shouldn't be, but we can't make those changes. So focusing on back on what can we control in the situation. So if you're finding a doctor that you've done research on this condition and you're not getting accurate information, that's not the doctor for you anyways. Don't
Yes.
keep Another thing I think is knowing how to do research on platforms that are accurate, right? So you can say, and I won't use any of the specific names, but some of the biggest research hospitals in America still have the outdated definition of endometriosis on their websites.
Mm.
So when a doctor who's not familiar with that condition goes on their website and they see that, that's what they also believe, and that's the information that they push out there as well. Even if it's wrong, they're not looking further. And why would they? Because if big names are putting it out there, even big news associations, just recently a
Mhm.
celebrity or somebody who was on TV was telling their story, and some of the big news outlets, hopped on it and shared that story out, thinking they were doing good advocacy, but they copy and pasted the definition from a website. And why would they have had to fact check themselves? Because they assumed that that
Yeah.
person did. Don't make assumptions. Making
Mhm.
sure you're using very accurate sources. So, for example, nonprofits that are dedicated to making a difference,
Mm.
do your research through them, because like we were saying, a lot of the times we find our information because we connect with other people who have to dedicate their whole life to
Yeah.
understanding what's going on with them. People who develop those nonprofits are out there trying to share the correct information, just like you, Kathy, and I are.
Yeah.
Put that education and awareness and advocacy out there so other people don't have to struggle for so long.
Yeah.
So just a couple off of the top of my head that I tend to see that are accurate for endometriosis are
Yeah.
the Endo Coalition,
Mhm.
as well as Endo Found. They have great information out there. I always try to say to stay away from personal doctors' websites necessarily, because we don't always know what their agenda is. I mean, I thought I was with an endometriosis specialist because I Googled endometriosis specialists near me, and it came up, oh my God, the person down the road, I didn't know they specialized in that. Be careful how you do Google searches because they can bite you in the butt. Um, just because somebody treats it doesn't mean they're an expert. Just because I attended a
Mm.
2-day seminar on dialectical behavior therapy and used some techniques from that type of therapy with clients does not mean I would ever call myself an expert. Um,
Mm.
that's something that I wish the professionals would kind of hone back into on. But once again, that's sometimes out of their control as well. So I think, support people, doing your own research, and also making sure that research is valid when you go in. something I also suggest is write down questions you want before you get in.
Mm.
It is so easy to get into that one-on-one room. A lot of times you're pretty rushed at a doctor's appointment too. And they'll say, "Any questions?" And you say, "No, I don't think so." And then you leave and
Yeah.
get to the car and you're like, "Holy crap, I forgot this symptom." Or I wanted to know more about this side effect and how it relates to this. Write everything down, whether that's your notes app on your phone or a handwritten notebook that you bring with you. Something that's also a suggestion too is sometimes having that person that's your support person take notes during the appointments.
Mm.
That can be helpful too, because a lot of the times you get a lot of information in
Mm.
one sitting and you're not processing it all or picking it all up. So hopefully those tips are helpful.
Oh.
I know things that I personally use as well. Um, and I think once again, while we're focused on endometriosis today, those are probably things that can be used for any chronic illness.
Yeah, thanks for sharing those. Those were so great. I didn't even think about bringing someone else, but I think that is like one of the best tips ever. Like, having that moral support, just having somebody else there and validating
Absolutely.
things for you is gonna help with mental health issues too for you as well, because when you're doing it alone, you're going to be more, full of anxiety and, you play things differently in your head versus what actual reality is happening, right? So that's a great tip. Thank you for sharing that. And I just want to let people know, honestly, seriously, education and like just letting yourself know about any possible like treatments versus is it like holistic or with the medical system, it doesn't matter. We were talking about this, Leslie, earlier, how knowledge is power. So someone who may be relying just on fully surgeries and like medicine and nothing is changing, maybe we need to someone needs to maybe try a holistic approach and add it, like it's you could do a balance of things. And that's the beauty of it, is where we get to have that power to try to see what actually works for everyone, because everyone is different. Like
And
whatever I'm doing may not be working for you. And we were talking before for this is like right now my periods are so heavy, but I'm not having a lot of endometriosis pain or any actual like period pain because I'm taking some herbal medication that my mother-in-law has been making for me. But, you know, it might not be working for other people like you, whatever you're doing. I'm not sure what you're doing currently, but maybe you want to share, what have you been doing to help with your endometriosis pain, just to see like what people are doing in real life examples. So people just, you know, don't focus on just what the medical system tells you, if that makes sense.
it makes 100% with that too. And I think it goes like, while we're going to talk about what I'm physically doing for my specific endometriosis, it
Yeah.
also is so important to highlight like that's a mental health approach that you just described too, like without
Mm.
even realizing it, right?
Wow,
So
yeah.
cognitive distortion, we should be listening to the doctors, right?
Mhm.
Let's challenge that cognitive distortion,
Yeah.
because when we stop thinking that things need to be cookie cutter or because somebody else is doing it it's going to work for us, we take away the shame, we take away those feelings,
Yes.
we challenge it and think of like a both and mindset. So, okay, personally for me, for many, many years, I was like, I am not taking the heavy hormone suppressant drugs. They don't treat anything. They are just band aids. They're just band aids. They don't treat anything. They're so bad for your body. Don't take them.
Mhm.
I am currently taking one of those heavy hormones and it's changed my life. And I think a lot of times what happens is we read other people's things, we look at the science, and we do that as the end all be all. And while it's really important, it's also important to incorporate how every single person's body is different and how it's going to react is different as well. And I think what works for you now may not always work for you too. Where before birth control was able to manage for me when I was in my teens and early 20s, now it doesn't touch it. So currently what I'm doing right now with my both and mindset that I've had to shift to as well is I couple the excision with my fembry. So it's similar to, those Orlissos, those Luprons that are out there. Those big names that you hear are so bad for your body. And
Mhm,
of course they can be, right? And of course it's not curative. Of course it's not actually
mhm,
treating it, but the fact that it's giving me a quality of life is outweighing all of that for me.
mhm,
And I'm not only just doing surgery and medicine, I'm also eating clean. I limit my processed sugars because my body personally cannot do those processed sugars well. Um, I do light movement exercise. I know women with endo who run marathons. I know women with endo who can't go for a walk without a flare. Right now, I've been in that place where I couldn't even do light passive stretching without it flaring me. But currently, I'm able to do yoga a few times a week. I do walks daily. I'll do the bike, things that are low impact that feel good for your body. I also take some supplements to try to get some of that inflammation under control, that vitamin D, magnesium, and these are all some things that I've been working with my doctor with. And I think that's a green flag when you're looking for a doctor too. And a specialist is somebody who acknowledges, well, surgery is the only thing that gets the root cause out of your body. It doesn't guarantee it's not going to grow back. So, what are we going to
mhm,
do to give you that best quality of life to be able to make the most of those times that you are feeling well? That you
mhm.
can decrease some of that suffering for yourself. Um, Heat, baths, Epsom salts. I do it all, right? And every single day maybe even looks a little bit different. Like I have Easy Menses is another endo women owned country or company, not country, that makes a product that has a CBD rub and CBD patches. So on days that I do wake up and I'm feeling really tight or whatever it might be, or if I'm struggling with an ovarian cyst, I'll use that, but I don't use it every single day. So listening to your body, knowing what works for you, and not letting other people, especially other people who aren't living with the disease and just like at you and your mental part of you, but even other people that are living with the disease that tell you what's right and what's not right for your own body because it doesn't cure, because it doesn't treat it. Don't be limited by other people's experiences. There's certain hormones that I'm sure others tolerate that I can't. IUDs can be life changing for people. For me, I was in the hospital for 3 days when I had one. So everybody's body is so differently, and there is a lot of risk, but there also can be a lot of benefits in exploring what works for you.
Yes. I love that how you said exploring what works for you. Seriously, that's the thing. I think if everything out of this whole conversation, we had this amazing conversation. If you didn't
Mhm.
grasp anything, we just want you to understand that you get the choice to pick and choose what works for you. Everybody is different. We all
Absolutely.
have our own endometriosis stories. Yes, we all have painful, flares, etc. Like those are similar, but the way we treat our body needs to be looked at individually. And I just want people to understand like you can take a holistic approach or you can do it together or mix it together or you can take the medical approach. It's like really up to you, but know in your full body and power that you get to choose whatever it may be. And like, if a doctor's telling you, "Hey, get a hysterectomy because it's going to cure these symptoms," and you have this gut feeling that it's like, what? It's not right. Like Leslie, right? You had a doctor tell you at 21 or 22 to get a hysterectomy at such a young age. And what if you said, okay, and didn't trust your instincts and you were, at 21, 22, what did you know any better, right? Like,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think to that same point as well, like I had so many people when I was in a support group state, I'm moving forward with the hysterectomy when I was 28, attack me. It's not curative. It's not curative. Why would you do that? It's not good for your body. Well, laying in bed more hours than I'm out of bed is also not good for my body?
mhm,
Um, it's really, really hard. And I think as women, we want to make sure the information is out there. It's something such
Yeah.
as sensitive to a hysterectomy because it is such a permanent thing. But every single person's life plan is completely different. Every body is different.
Yes.
For me, it was one of the better choices that I've made because it has decreased. But like you're
Wow.
saying, like that doctor looked at me and said at 21, 20, I think I was 22 at the time. And he was just like, yeah, I can offer a hysterectomy and that's going to be curative. And I told him hysterectomies are not curative because at that point I'd started doing research and he told me I was at an impasse for treatment. If I had heard that when I was 26, 27, 28, and had gained some confidence and not been in the midst of enduring the gaslighting, I would
Mhm.
have been like, bye, buddy. But at that point
Yeah.
in time, it was so mentally defeating. And it was one more thing. And I remember sobbing and having to pull over on the side of the
Oh.
road when I left that appointment because I was like,
Oh.
heck am I ever going to get myself better if doctors aren't even giving me factual information right now?
Yeah, exactly. But see, we put so much power into these doctors, but really our power is ourselves. There is actual research, like I read the book Heal Endo with
Mhm.
Katie Edmonds. I think that's her name, right? Uh, w-
Like looking
but
next to me because that's the one that I have directly next to me right now.
yeah. And that book is so informative. Like she did a bunch of research and I actually had her on my Instagram twice. I don't know why. But anyways, like she is a endometriosis advocate as well and she does research. There is research out there. There is hope. I mean, there is information. It's just like, are you willing to learn or not? Like, are you willing to, make the right choices for yourself? Instead of I don't want to make it so sensitive, but I feel like most of us try to be in this victim mindset of like everything's against us and, everything's not like
Mhm.
working the way it is for us. But it's like really it can be if you choose that, if that makes sense. And for me, I felt like I was in a victim mindset where I was relying so much and putting all my power on my doctor instead of myself that a lot of us do that, right? But then once I learned that there is so much information that we have such an amazing, freaking amazing group of women, like, advocates in this community, which is so beautiful to see. I feel like everybody is a badass, like, honestly. We're all here to
Absolutely.
help one another. So we're actually not alone in this sense too. Like they make it
Really.
seem like, and we all know when we do go through this journey, we find ourselves to be more empowered at the end of our journey, right? Most of us, when we do finally get that diagnosis, or we finally get that surgery that we've been wanting, it just feels so liberating and just finding this community is beautiful. And look, we found each other.
Exactly. I know it. And like so much of what you were just saying was, it speaks to the inequities that are out there. Like for many, it's easier because of their position in life, the color of the skin, where they
Mm,
live, resources, all of that. But at the end of the day, you can apply this to any situation, but at the end of the day, women's health care ends up being really neglected.
yeah,
And a lot of times the research and funding goes towards early diagnosis and fertility when we have 1 in 10 women living with this disease that have been
yeah,
diagnosed. Right? So, how about the people that are already diagnosed and maybe have already lost their fertility? But I think to going back to your point, of that hope. Hope is such a big thing. Brene Brown has a quote in one of her books. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I'm sure you can find it. Atlas of the Heart, that's what it is. And hopeless is when you shut your mind to being allow the possibility of good. When you're still, that's the scary place to be. And I've been there, don't get me wrong.
yeah,
I've been, and it's taken an active role from me to go to that mindset of hopeful. Because when you can be hopeful about what's going to come in
yeah,
the future, I mean, my Fembry wasn't even a drug 10 years ago, and now it's changing my life,
yeah,
Those little wins, those little gains,
mhm,
every study we get, every bill that's passed, every politician that we can get in our corner, those are little wins. And the Swiftie in me kind of lives by this quote to live for the hope of it all. because we
Yeah.
have to live for the hope of it all. We have to live for that hope. And I'm a big proponent of getting all the information that you can and then figuring out what you can do with that information. And they may not be easy choices, it may not be feasible, but what are the little action steps that you can take? How can you break it down into SMART goals? And that's actually where some of the life coaching stuff started coming
Yeah.
in for me too. Like I love the mental health side of what I do, but also sometimes at the end of the day, we get to that point where we're done wanting to psychoanalyze why we are the way we are, and we just want to figure
Yeah.
out how to move forward from there. So
Mhm.
that's something that I think both serve such huge purposes. And you get to that point in therapy as well, but in coaching, that's kind of that difference. With
Yeah.
coaching, start with your goals, where in
Yeah.
therapy, you kind of look at it all. Why is it the way it is? And then
Yeah.
go through your goals.
Yeah. So true. But thank you so much, Leslie, for all that
Oh,
you have shared, your knowledge. Honestly, we can talk for hours and hours, but
yeah,
I just really want people to take away the importance of, you have your own power. We are all different, and everybody literally has a different plan. And just know that knowledge is power in general. And thank you, Leslie, for coming on, sharing your story, sharing your knowledge, and all the amazingness that you are, and for, giving us your love and light. So thank you for that. But before we end, I want people to know where they can find you more if people do want to work with you. Like you said, you do some life coaching. How and
absolutely.
where can they find you?
Absolutely. I think probably the best and easiest way is either my Instagram or my email. And I'm sure Kathy will be able to kind
Yes.
of link that in a comment.
Mm-hmm.
My Instagram is at leslie.advo for endo.14. And my Instagram or my email is leslie.patriarco14@gmail.com. And she has both of those in full permission to reach out to me. I would
Awesome.
love to you guys see your goals. I have a lot of fun, exciting things coming up. As I'm sure Kathy does too. And she has been
Yeah.
great spot in the endo community. So
Aw.
I was so excited to collaborate with this.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.